That was a very long sit-down interview you had with the President of the ECB. You touched on many issues, from the economy to President Donald Trump to China. Fill us in.
Yes, Maeve. And of course, Christine Lagarde is incredibly powerful, very influential. And this is now head of the European Central Bank, who, if she has something to say, she will say it, and you'll hear it very clearly. In this conversation, we talked about the European economy, as you pointed out. We also talked about the trajectory of interest rates. This is crucial, of course, for European consumers. The European Central Bank just had to increase interest rates as a result of a pickup in inflation because of the instability we see certainly playing out in the energy market because of the war and the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. And then we talked about Europe, a lot on Europe. She said by now the Europeans have recognized some of their weaknesses and they have to reform and they have to address those issues. She's a real champion of the Capital Markets Union, suggesting that the fact that we have billions of euros that will leave Europe to go and be invested in the U.S. is a total anomaly, and this money should stay here. So the Capital Markets Union continues to be her priority. And then we also talked about this idea of a European safe asset. Obviously, this is a very technical debate. If you're an EU nerd, and here we are, but this is really fundamentally a question about creating a sort of, instrument, a tool that would see the Europeans borrow together to fund and pay for common projects for key issues, including defense, but that also could create a sort of bond market that could rival the U.S. treasuries. And I asked her this question because this is very much in the zeitgeist, because the Spanish have picked up on a proposal initially by Mario Draghi, now saying they would like to see about 150 billion euros a year of this funding. They argue that in the end, there is a case that it could be cheaper if you reduce interest rates and the payments that individually you'd have to make by doing it collectively. I asked this question to Christine Lagarde, and she told me, look, put it on the table, just debate it. Let's take a look.
It's pretty obvious that we also need to have a European asset which can, parallel with the US Treasury bonds, for instance. How we go about it, how the moral hazard is addressed, how it's allocated in terms of results to be decided. And I think it's great that a country like Spain, for instance, makes a proposal, puts it on the table for debate. And it's now for the others to say, OK, we like this part, we don't like this, we can address it.
So when you hear these numbers, 800 billion euros, Mario Draghi echoed that. The Spanish seem to be putting that on the table. The French president has said, in his view, there are no taboos. That doesn't scare you. When you hear 800 billion euros, this kind of money.
Remember what we did for COVID. That was the amount that was actually put on the table for joint borrowing in order to respond and to produce the recovery and what was it? RRF, the
Recovery and Resilience.
Yeah, Recovery and Resilience Fund. That was roughly the amount. And the Commission went to market. We helped in the process because we act as an agent in that respect, and it was widely, broadly subscribed, oversubscribed. So I'm not saying that this is the amount. I'm just saying that to go with the capital market, you need depth, you need liquidity, and you need to entice the savings of Europe onto that market.
And that is, of course, ahead of the European Central Bank. And Maeve, this is a very hot topic in Brussels. And as you know, the question of joint debt is, in essence, very, very political in Europe. It is interesting, however, that she is saying, let's debate it on merit. You'd have countries like Germany, the Dutch too, who'd say, absolutely not. We've said we would not agree. That was a one-off. We do not want this to become a constant. But the debate is certainly now out there. And then the other point, just briefly, we spoke about China. The Europeans have said now, they've set out this deadline in October, we need to see a rebalancing in the trade relationship between the Chinese and the Europeans. They have posted a massive trade surplus last year, the Chinese, and the European deficit keeps getting bigger. I asked her what happens if in October there's no deal. This is a difficult deadline because it could potentially lead to a form of retaliation. And she told me there now needs to be a serious, quote, conversation among adults when it comes to the subsidies, when it comes to the prices, when it comes to some of the practices, almost sector by sector with the Chinese, because they talk, but now they need to really walk the talk when it comes to a relationship that works for both.